Hello, everybody. Welcome back to information session number 16. We're very excited to have you all participating in the final stretch of the competition. Just as a reminder, the final submission videos will be due on March 31st. And if you do have questions about that, please check out information session number 14 as it goes over the judging process and the submission process. So we look forward to seeing all your experiences. And I will pass it to Marcus to introduce our guests for today.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Hi, everybody in the community. So we're going to get right into this because we're very excited. We have a guest today, Ylva Hansdotter, who, quite frankly, we were just talking about how we wish that we would have had her earlier in our information sessions, but we didn't get acquainted till recently because she's a real gem, particularly for what we're doing as part of this competition. And the reason she's someone that I think the community is going to be very interested in hearing from is Ylva she's based in Stockholm, and she has a PhD, an actual doctorate degree that she received at the University College of Dublin in creative technology and innovation, specifically focused on designing in virtual reality and augmented reality for social causes. And so since 2017, she has been doing virtual reality for good with a doctorate lens, a PhD lens on how to design in virtual reality for driving impact. So, I mean, it's a complete wheelhouse of hers to be advising us on how to use this for building education, empathy, and awareness around the Sustainable Development Goals. She's part of the World Economic Forum. She's a fellow on the Council for VR and AR, being used for social issues at the World Economic Forum. And just in general, and having a few conversations with her, she really has the expertise that we need in our community because she's designed a whole methodology and protocol and framework for how to use these immersive and experiential technologies like VR to create the education, awareness, and empathy around social causes. So with that, let me introduce Ylva, and Ylva, I guess the first thing it would be great is we probably have people in our community that didn't realize that you can get a legitimate accredited university PhD. I mean, we've showed them some boot camps that they can go to and things to earn, to get extra professional training. But the fact that you've actually taken this, the fact that there's actually doctorate degrees in this field is interesting. You're probably one of the first in the generation to actually earn these degrees. And then you're actually applying it out there in the real world with groups like the World Economic Forum and the other work you do. So maybe you can just share a little bit about that experience to get that degree, what your concentration is, and then how you evolve that into your field of work that you do today before you jump into, I know that you're going to share this whole framework that you've designed. So with that, Ylva, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. And I'm so thrilled about being here, and also excited to see once the competition is finalized, everything that will be, I hope, out there. So really, really glad to be here. Yeah, as Marcus said, I just recently completed my PhD in virtual reality for social good. And I actually came into it. So I was already working in virtual reality, and I started looking at, from a business perspective, how we could support VR experiences towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I was fortunate enough to meet this professor at UCD, so University College of Dublin, that told me about her PhD program, which is within creative technology innovation for social good. So it's not only virtual reality, it can be any form of technology, but it's a lot of focus on VR and AR, AI, and other kinds of technology to work and make the world a better place and make it more inclusive and sustainable, and yeah, include a pragmatic view on we can actually use technology and research to make a positive difference in the world.
Ylva, real quickly on that, I'm just interested. So the University College Dublin offers a degree where I'm just curious, are there other universities, when you look at established universities that have really established programs, are there other options for degrees? I know Dublin's an innovator as a country, in Ireland as a country, they're pretty innovative. Was there other university degrees that you're seeing pop up as well that are really accredited?
I would actually not fully know that, but what I do know is that some of the most known research entities for virtual reality is Stanford and the University of Barcelona. So we have in Stanford, we have Jeremy Bailenson, who's done a tremendous amount of research, he and his group, like there's a lot of people involved around VR, and especially VR for social good. Same with Mel Slater and the University of Barcelona, where there's a lot of research as well showing how effective virtual reality can be and how to design for impact.
Great, okay, thank you.
Okay, I have, I think it's 11 slides that I'm going to show you today. And I'm going to go from telling you what I've done to diving into the research, which can be a little bit of detail. Some of you might know it, some of you will not know it, but I think it's good to have a background to say, why is virtual reality so impactful as it is? And then I'll go and show how I used these research insight and my experience from working in VR and overseeing thousands of user tests into this framework that I call VR for Impact framework. So let me just share my screen and I'll dive right in. Okay, do you see it?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I'll just, I already told you about my PhD, but I also run a not-for-profit organization, XR Impact, with the purpose of using XR technologies for social good. So I started creating this platform, which I call the Be Earth platform, which is a VR platform around the global goals with experiences where the goals functions as portals to different experiences. And as I'm a not-for-profit, I'm in fundraising to get funding for these experiences. And the first experience I created was around the climate action goals, so goal number 13. And I was lucky enough to get funded from Meta and the Swedish International Development Agency. I'll tell you a little about this Be Earth number 13 experience. Before I dive into how it was constructed. So it is a virtual reality experience, immersive. So it's 6 degrees of freedom, which means that you're tracked and you can move around and touch things and interact with things. It's built in Unity. And I'm using external hardware for hand tracking, so I'm not using controllers. So if you see on the girl to the right, she's wearing a little sensor it's a leap motion to track her hands. But
okay,
the experience,
just to clarify, Ylva, so this was an experience you created.
Yeah.
Did you have and you built it in Unity, so you didn't build it within an existing platform like Engage or Spatial, you actually created it from scratch in Unity?
Yes.
Did you have did you have a team that was doing
Yes.
Technical engineers that were building in Unity, and you were kind of directing and orchestrating the whole experience? You were almost like a director of the production?
Yes, exactly so. So I had two amazing VR designers, 3D designers, and with me, Paulo Gibbs and Bo Aguilar. Both are from Brazil, so this also made sense since we were in the Amazon rainforest. And I'm going to show you a little video clip what this is, but we spent, I would say, I spent a long time creating the manuscript and like the storyline and deciding music and everything, but the actual coding time, we were sitting more or less 2 months straight, but day and night to complete it. So here is a short trailer, and I hope the sound is active.
Welcome to this introduction to Be Earth number 13, a virtual reality experience for climate action.
We need to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts.
The experience show man-made fires in the Amazon rainforest and their broader impacts on the Earth ecosystem as a whole. We wanted to increase the sense of personal responsibility and accountability for what is happening to our climate. In the experience, you get to embody Earth and firsthand see the beauty and ongoing horror in the Amazon rainforest. During the experience, you will transform with your environment, becoming the forest, the water, the ashes and the air, because you are Earth. And you can use the elements to help fight further deforestation. We wanted to present data in a way that made people feel and act on it. And the story itself builds on scientific data and findings from research in virtual reality and behavioral science, mixing facts, art, love, and hope for tomorrow. The embodiment of Earth stimulates a deeper understanding of how everything is interlinked, an understanding that every one of us is Earth, and that we only exist as one system. A deeper understanding that we're doing this to ourselves, because we are Earth.
Okay, so that was the experience, and I will tell you a little bit more about it when I talk about how I use the framework. First, I'm going to talk about how I set up the framework. I used my practical experience from working in virtual reality. As I told you, I've been responsible for customer feedback and overseeing a lot of demos and also developer feedback on what is good and what is not good to do in virtual reality. I also had a team of experts that I involved in designing this framework. So I made interviews with a number of experts who've been working in the field as I have as well, but that added over 40 years of experience into the framework. I made a very, very deep literature review looking at, I would say, a large majority of the research that has been done around this specific area. And I also used the user feedback from the experience to create this framework, the VR for Impact framework. I still call it a draft framework though, because I feel it needs to be tested with more experiences. I want to increase the number of there are guidelines in there for developing, and I want to increase these to be more comprehensive. But it's a beginning, it's a skeleton to a framework, and I'll go through that framework with you as well. And based on this framework, we designed then the Be Earth number 13. And I know that you've now been in the program for quite some time, and you've probably done a lot of the designing already, and you probably know a lot. I know you also had sessions around how virtual reality can stimulate empathy, but I just want to talk about the two main themes that I think that virtual reality is really strong on. Like, one is perspective taking. And to me, and also in research, it's shown that it's not necessarily so that we need to be empathetic or feel what others are feeling to be more prosocial. It actually helps to just understand others better. So there's a strong link between understanding others and doing good deeds. And we all know that virtual reality is really kick-ass at perspective taking, because it can really transport us to somewhere else, or it can let us visit other people in their worlds. So these are 4 experiences that are designed to this purpose. You probably have seen some of them. So New York Times created an experience called Displaced, where they follow 3 of the almost 40 million displaced children in the world. And The Last Goodbye, where you follow Holocaust survivor to the camp where he lost his mother and sister. And both of these experiences, they're non-interactive, they're 360 videos, and you just get to follow along and visit their day or hear their stories. But it becomes so much more powerful because in the case of The Last Goodbye, you're entering the halls of a camp, and Pinchas Gutter, which is the man that you're seeing, he really fills these empty halls with his story and talking about what happened on a day-to-day basis, where they ate, how daily life was, and the horrible things that happen inside the camp as well. And you cannot unsee or understand what he's been going through when you've been there with him. So virtual reality can actually create memories as if we were there, as if this happened to us, as if I had been talking to him in real life. And the other two experiences on this slide take it a step further. You actually become someone else. So this is where you track and you have an avatar and you are part of the story. So Becoming Homeless is created by Stanford, the Jeremy Bailenson team. And it's been a lot of research ongoing with this experience, looking how people actually change their attitudes and behavior after being embodied as a person who loses their apartment, they lose their job, their apartment, and becomes homeless. And it's been really showing great results in people signing up for a petition for homeless sheltering, et cetera, et cetera. And on the right-hand side is offenders becoming the victim in virtual reality, which is a really mind-blowing experience where domestic abuse offenders, convicted domestic abuse offender, got to embody a female victim. So perspective taking is generally a method to rehabilitate domestic abuse offenders, but in virtual reality, this is so much more effective. So they tested men before and after the virtual reality experience, and these convicted men didn't have the emotional recognition to see fear in female faces. But after being embodied as a female victim, their emotional recognition became normalized to men who are not domestic abuse offenders. So it's really, really powerful, this perspective taking you can do with virtual reality. And the other thing is, we can not only change increase our understanding of others, we can actually, when we become others, change who we are. So it's been shown it's an effect called the Proteus effect. That was defined by Yi and Bailenson and one other guy I can't remember right now in 2007, where we start, it's an effect where we start to associate ourselves with the characteristics of our avatar. So for example, going in virtual reality as Albert Einstein made people afterwards, after taking off the headset, perform better on problem-solving tests, like IQ went up, because we started to associate ourselves with someone who's smart. And this is not, I mean, this is the same thing as athletes do when they visualize that, like positive visualization. I can do this, and you're more likely to be able to do this. I'm smart, I can fix this test. And you do, and you actually improve your problem-solving ability. What also happened in this specific experience was that the participants' age bias was reduced as well, because these were students being in an avatar as an elder man, Einstein. So tests also show that age biases diminished. And the other, on the right-hand side, it's an experience where you had a gameplay where you were either Voldemort, which is a villain for you who doesn't know that, and Superman, of course, a superhero. And depending on which avatar you were in the virtual environment, afterwards, there was a second test that was to be perceived as not linked, where you have to pour another real human being, either chili sauce or chocolate sauce. And the ones, as you can understand, the ones who were super good in virtual reality were really good in reality as well. So pouring chocolate sauce or very, very small quantities of chili sauce. Whereas the Voldemorts, they kept on pouring the chili sauce for the next pour contestants. So it really impacts us in a way. Our brain and our sense of self is really malleable, and we can transform. So in virtual reality, we can form a way or model a way of being that we can transport in the natural world.
Super interesting. You know what, Ylva, it reminds me of that famous study that was done, I think in the 60s. I thought it was at Stanford University. Remember where professor had these students giving electric shocks in one room to a patient in another room. And the patient in the other room, you heard screams every time they did the electric shock, but they were trying to show, why would people obey orders even if they know it's hurting someone? Like that whole mentality, like a very, so you take a college student who's ethical, but when you put them in a room and they think there's a something controlled going on and there's an authority telling them to do something, they'll do that even if they know that they feel like what they're doing is hurting someone. That was, I don't remember that. They made a whole movie about this though. I thought it was, it's a little bit of that type of research that's currently happening, right? In this field.
Yeah, it is similar. And that's one thing that virtual reality is really good at, doing these kind of behavioral studies, because you can manipulate in an easy way without being, because sometimes these behavioral experiments, they sort of went over what was okay to do with the person.
It's really, I mean, the virtual reality, I've said this often on these, as part of these discussions, it's really more of an exercise in behavioral science than it is a technical exercise, of course, right?
Definitely.
The whole new field of behavioral science,
Yeah. And this is why I'm telling like these stories, because what we are talking about here is not a technical medium. It's a medium for communication. It's a medium for storytelling. It's a medium that will impact humans. So we have to be careful what we do, because this can be, as understood, used for good and for bad, but it's really the psychologically most powerful communication platform we have ever created. And it can sometimes be even more powerful than in real life. So
yeah, I mean, it almost, for people that are interested in getting a sociology degree or anthropology degree, it really is an asset for that whole field of study, like a new tool that they can use to really,
yeah,
experiment.
definitely. Okay, so I talked about self-transformation and perspective taking, and why VR is so good at prosocial change, or how it's actually affecting prosocial change. I'm going to talk very, very briefly around the concepts behind it, and I know you already know most of this, but these are what I looked at, 4 of the areas that are most like the affordances of virtual reality, why it is so effective at perspective taking and self-transformation. So the first one is immersion, and just the fact that in virtual reality, we are inside the media. We're immersed in the media. There's nothing ongoing around us. We can't, or at least limited the noise from the outside. We can't see anything apart from the virtual world we're in, which means that our focus, our concentration can be much, much higher. And the effects has been shown in education, and this alone might be one of the strongest reasons why it's so effective in education, because you cannot do anything but be in the experience. Well, you can have your imagination, but there's a lot of distractions that are removed. Another thing is presence, which I think you all know is the feeling of actually being there, and the feeling of what is happening is actually happening. Even if you know cognitively that you're not in virtual reality, it's really hard not to react if like a big troll comes and is a big, like something at you, you duck, or you run, or you hide. You get your pulse up. Even if you know it's not real, you keep on reacting to virtual reality as if it was real. It's hard to go off a cliff and that's very, very strong. And also here, the fact that it impacts us as in reality really also makes it very strong for learning, because we remember more what happened to us than things we read about. Embodied cognition is the notion that we learn not only through our brains, but the whole body is engaged in learning. And in a 3D environment, we can actually use more senses. We can walk around, and this lets the virtual environment, as well as our avatar, to actually shape our cognition in a way that reading a book will not allow. And it's been used a lot, for example, in mental health, like anything from curing PTSD to anxiety disorders, like agoraphobia. You can have a controlled environment, but the presence, the immersion, and the embodied cognition, you are there, you're feeling it, you can move your body, you react as if it's reality, but you still can control so the spider will not attack you, and you can feel like, and you can do the therapy in a slow pace. So it's really effective for that. But apart, then the fourth thing, which is obvious but really powerful, is that it is not reality. It feels like reality. It impacts us super hard, but we do not have to abide by the laws of physics. We can go back in time. We can go up to space. We can like have the whole solar system in our room, or we can have just like study an atom in detail. So this playing with scales, time and space is really powerful as well for describing complex things or increasing our understanding for others, because we can be transported to get a new perspective. So this is more or less very, very summarized everything I've done for 4 years in one slide. This is the research behind it. It's a lot of studies in there, but this is the foundation that went into the framework. So now I come into the last part of what I'm going to talk about here today.
Real quickly, Ylva, too, on your previous slide, I mean, we did a couple sessions on design thinking, which is, I used design thinking when I was, executive at Deloitte and at Bain Consulting, in terms of the way you think about, that's the perspective taking is that leads to even persona mapping. So you come up with a persona, like this is Jenny, she's a domestic abuse victim. And so how do you map out her persona in terms of the way that she would perceive things? So I can appreciate when you have this overall framework where you say you've been spending years kind of at a high level, this represents what you've been spending years of your professional focus on. Just the power of one of those, like perspective taking, there's this whole field of study just within that area, right? Like design thinking and persona mapping and storytelling. So it's great to see you bring that all together and put that in the context of virtual reality specifically.
Yeah, and when we go into the framework, and I talk about, so you're going to see that, but when I talk about the story or whatever, like what is your experience, high level, what is that, what's going to happen? It doesn't need to be a story. It often is, but it doesn't need to be. But you have to think about who is being impacted, what you want to like, what is it? So it's really, really very close to this mapping out the journey. I can tell you when I started doing my experience, I started out, what did I want to achieve? What did I want people to feel and take out of it? How do they want them to change? But then I actually model it in my living room. So I took like, for example, you already in the video saw that I had Earth in the center, and when you touched it, the global goals came out. I actually put a lamp in the middle of the room, and I walked around and I put up like small notes where each goal would be, and I tested everything in real space and then I created this journey. I went from scene to scene, and I went through it before I started doing it in virtual reality. Okay, the VR for Impact framework draft, as I said, it revolves around 4 different areas. So it's the purpose, content, usability, and technology. And for the purpose, I've been using, in my research, I've been using a model for change, which is like the behavioral change wheel. And I don't want to go into, because there's so much research in there. I suggest if you want to do, or when you do, like if you haven't done, if you want to go one more time over your goal or the purpose, look at the behavioral change wheel, look at the COM-B model of behavior that is attached to it. And you can see that, what do I really want to change? Like go into the designing. I know I'm pretty late in the process for you guys, but rethink and ensure that you're always on target. What are you trying to say? That is what goes through all of the other 3 areas. I'm going to talk about the content, usability, and technology, which is the focus of my framework. And the content part is, this is really, how do I create an experience that is impactful and enjoyable and supports this perspective taking and self-transformation? So what is the scenario? I call it scenario because I didn't want to call it story, because it might not be a story. But what is the scenario? What can it do? What are the key takeaways? How are the social actors? And the social actor can be an avatar, which is controlled by a human, or an agent, which is an algorithm. represented? What can they do if you have others? How is the participant, him, herself, represented if they are? What can they do? And how are the aesthetics of the experience supporting the overall purpose? So that's the content domain. The usability and technology I call the form factors. So they aim to create a highly immersive environment that supports presence, embodied cognition, and flow. So that is more like ensure that you don't take focus of the content, because the main key thing is the content, and everything else is just there to ensure that you're not interrupted, that you don't, like, you feel this flow and you are present and you feel that this is really happening. So it is like, how do you guide the participant? What kind of locomotion tactics do you use? Is it teleportation or like a scripted scenario, or do you use interaction?
Even like game theory or putting gamification into the model?
Yeah, definitely. So, and how do you track the user? Are there other senses than seeing and hearing? And a very important question is actually, where and how will the experience be used? Because if you want to use it in a museum or a school or an event, you want to make it short and easy to learn. Do you want someone to use it in their home every day? Well, then it can't, like, then it needs to be more explorative or like have room for a longer experience. So I'm sorry for these slides. I put them together just now and I didn't actually have time to read them through, so I hope there aren't too many errors. It's very much text, and I think you can go back to it and look at it afterwards, but these are my final 3 slides. So it's the content, usability, and technology. So in the content, I have guidelines around the content. So for example, ensure to bridge distances, because this is one of the superpowers of virtual reality. So allow participants to visit an unknown, like imaginary environment, or a remote or dangerous place, or visit the lives of others, or virtually be another. So allow them to do something they're not usually doing in reality, because it's easier to develop empathy towards those or places that we are familiar to. So really see what can you do to, because this perspective taking is really what will change people and make them do pro-social deeds and be like, for example, in this case, climate action. So for Be Earth number 13, we transported participants to the Amazon rainforest, which is a remote place for most people. I mean, a lot of people know that there are ongoing fires, but it's still something you read about in the newspapers. Having it happen to you is different. Focus on the purpose. I sort of touched this earlier, but virtual reality can be super overwhelming. Even if you've been many times in VR and devices are getting better and better, it is really overwhelming. And narration can, for example, complete with other elements of the experience. So it's really important to think, do I really need this? Is this an element that I need to add that drives the purpose of this experience or not? If not, I would actually suggest that you remove it. Don't overcloud the core with a lot of frizz around it. So, and it's also important with repetition for comprehension and memory retention. And one more thing, be very cautious if you use controversial data. You might want to use it, you might want to provoke, but every data is the result of somebody's interpretation. And that could actually take focus off your purpose. So for us in Be Earth number 13, we decided not to say, for example, how many square meters of forest in the Amazon burns per day, because some might have another data point for that fact. And that would sort of break presence and like get them not to have as high trust in the experience. So really focus on what you want, like the purpose of the experience, and take everything else out of it. And I felt I wanted to add things in the beginning, but I'm so glad that we kept it to minimum. And this, if I redid it, I would even remove additional things. Keep the participant emotionally engaged. So you had a whole session about this, and this is the most important point for actual change in behavior. So higher engagement correlates to higher impact. I saw that in my research as well, and seen it in other research. So a strong dramatic arc can increase oxytocin in the brain and promote prosocial behavior. So
We had,
sorry,
just
yeah.
on that note, Ylva, as you referenced, we had Caitlin Krause out of Stanford University do an information session. What session was that, Sam, for people that go on the YouTube channel? And she specializes in how do you create mindfulness and emotional experiences in VR. And so she's done a lot of experimentation to see what's the best way to get people emotionally, social and emotionally engaged in the environment. And to your point, that's kind of the secret sauce in terms of like why you would do it in VR versus trying to hear a lecture or watch a video, because you have these extra tools around your senses that can actually signal in your brain, these social and emotional cues to really get you engaged in what you're watching more so than other mediums.
Yes,
Definitely.
and that's information session number 7 for anybody who's interested in watching it.
Number 7, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, regardless if you're using a story, like it's story driven or not, but if you're using a story, ensure that you there are a lot of research on how to create a powerful dramatic arc. And in VR number 13, we use that and we have the participant go through an emotional roller coaster, but ending on a positive note, because we wanted this positive, forward thinking, I can change, I can do this, I'm a hero attitude. And I mean, I used narration, I wrote the text, and I looked at the background music to reinforce the feeling I wanted to promote. And in terms of music, as I wanted this experience to be in schools and museums, I wanted to use well-known classical music, and it's quite easy to buy quite to a low price with compositors that have died for, I think it's 70 years ago. So you can get really, really good music to your experience in a good way by doing so. And as I said, in my experience, in my research, the emotional impact, so the stated emotional impact of the participants had the highest correlation to a positive change. So they became more environmentally sustainable afterwards. Support social presence. It's not necessary that your experience is social, and by social I don't mean that it needs to be multiplayer experience. What I mean is that you have other entities that seem to be have an intelligence, regardless if they're computer driven or controlled by humans. But there's a lot of research showing that having social presence actually supports a stronger effect, and you can, for example, have synchronous movement to increase trust, and there are a lot of tricks and tools to use social agents and avatars to create a better experience. In VR number 13, we used water spirits, for example, to model behavior, but also to increase the feeling of closeness to nature and being part of everything, being part of a group that did something good. Making it personal. This is also, I mean, it's very connected to the keeping the participant emotionally engaged, but making it personal was one of the most highlighted thing by the expert group. And people are more affected than whatever is happening inside the VR experience is happening to them, versus when they're, for example, only visiting a place and not engaging. But having said that, it's not necessary. I mean, going in a 360 VR experience to visit a refugee camp is really highly motivational as well. And well, it's horrible, but for social impact to actually want to help and make a difference, it's really effectful as well. But if you can, and if you use some form of tool to make it personal, it's effective as well. And in VR number 13, you actually become Earth, and climate change happens to you. And involve the participant in a positive way. So this is something, I mean, there's a lot of people wanting to do experiences that are emotionally engaging, but maybe showing dystopian scenarios. So this is the world, how it looks once we didn't start to live more sustainably, or like have more a dystopian ending. What I've seen and what I strongly believe is that a hero story, a positive narrative where you engage the participant in a positive way, actually enforces the self-transformation part of that VR can support with. So making it more likely that the participant actually acts afterwards in a positive way. So
that's interesting, Ylva, because I'm thinking to myself, traditional media has learned through evolution that if it bleeds, it reads. If there's violence, if it's covering stories that are fear mongering and getting you scared and hiding your fear senses, that attracts more people, more eyeballs. But you're saying that if you're trying to change someone's behavior and you're using VR as a tool, your research has shown that rather than trying to fear monger or scare them into action, by bringing them maybe into, you're saying that somehow making it a very positive or enlightening experience for them versus them leaving with all this anxiety and fear, that's a better way to motivate them.
Yeah, it's been shown, for example, if you for example, showing a polar bear that it's starving, it's very emotionally engaging. It's horrible, but it's been shown that high level empathy actually sometimes causes us not to act, because it gets so costly for us to think about it that we sort of just bury our heads in the ground. So the positive notion of like this more positive way is that you become empowered. And since you've already been in the story and you hopefully you've done something positive in there, you know that you can be part of the solution. I'm not saying that you should never show the dystopian scenario. I'm just saying,
I understand it's a tactic. What you're saying is a tactic. Like, of course, you show the reality of how bad and harsh it is, a polar bear starving or a rainforest getting destroyed. You still show the reality, but you're saying the experience ultimately should be an uplifting, positive experience where they're inspired to act, not feared to act. Interesting.
Yes. So what we did was this, I hear a story. So even if you actually become part of the rainforest and you do actually burn down and you can see your hands being turned to ashes in like the second to final scene. And it is correct data there, but that we can't just replant trees, because what has been lost has been lost. But it is a positive way, because then you have the where you are uplifted in the sky and you have the overview effect of Earth, which is a cognitive shift where we see Earth in space and you see how boundaries disappear. And it's like this awe-inspiring moment that has been described by astronauts. And Mother Earth talks to you in that scene in a very loving way and saying, we more or less, we shall overcome. We can do this. You're part of the solution. So being like the positive, you've been there, you helped put out the fire. This is happening. It's horrible, but you helped solve it. You can still do that. Okay. Finally, in content, prioritize a smooth and consistent experience. So I had in the content something called aesthetics. The thing is that look and feel is really secondary. I've seen really promising effects of what I would say some really rudimentary graphics. It doesn't have to be super pretty. You can get the effect without that, but it is easier and better the more consistent you are. And you should prioritize that it's smooth over that it's nice. And this is something I didn't do. So Björk number 13 is really graphically beautiful, but that actually hurt the frame rate a bit. So it's better the effect can be there, even like, think again, what is the purpose? What is the minimal thing I can do to reach my purpose? And don't add too much frills. Usability, keep it short. And this is really hard, but I know a lot of VR developers are limiting their experiences to 20 minutes. Because it's hard to be in VR longer than 20 minutes. And Björk, we limited to 10 minutes, because if you are in an event and you have 3 people in line, that means a 30 minutes wait till the next person can get in the VR experience. And it doesn't feel too short. So think about why you want to have people watch it. If you want them to see it at an event, or like if most people that will go into your experience will be beginners, don't make it too long. Support flow, so don't no division of attention, support a feeling of being in control. And this is important, what I've seen from doing a lot of demos. It's really hard for new, like beginners, to learn the controllers, and each headset have a different mode of using the controllers, and the commands can be different. And a lot of people become self-conscious, especially if you're trying it outside your own home. So, you know, people are looking at you, you feel dumb because you can't, like, you don't know how to navigate or do something. And it's really, really hard. And that takes definitely the focus of the purpose. So as much as possible, ensure that it's easy and that the participant doesn't become like self-conscious. So for Björk number 13, we thought about this, like I wanted to record testimonials, but then I realized, no, this will make people self-conscious. I limited the interaction to this purpose as well, wanted it to be easy. Same with making it intuitive, and what is intuitive for one person isn't for the next. So here you need to do user tests, of course. But especially like locomotion, like how to transport you from one place to another, can be really difficult. So a lot of platforms use teleportation, but you can also have like controller-based or scripted. The best method is natural walking, because that will not cause nausea, but a lot of other locomotion techniques actually causes nausea or disorientation. For Björk number 13, I used natural walking in a specific scene, but between scenes, I had scripted locomotion, and that was to make it easier for the user, but also be able to control the user experience, because I wanted them to actually go from one scene to another, and that was the easiest way of doing that. But so this is not a guideline on exactly how to do it, but really think it through and have people test it. And also, more than you think it's necessary, guide the participants. It's so easy to become disoriented, especially if you do, for example, teleportation. Like, you've been in your experience so many times that you definitely know where like everything is and how to get along. But for a person seeing it for the first time, everything can be disorienting. So use guidance. It's the same with the following point. Like, if you're making it interactive, ensure that you guide the user on when and where they can interact. So either you can have an arrow or a glowing object, or you have haptic feedback when they come close to the object itself. And for Björk, we had this, as I said, it's scripted locomotion, and we also used the water spirits to model a behavior. So the participant can actually, because they had been transformed to water. So when they came from the forest, they touched the Amazon River, they became water, and the fire started. So they can use the fact that they were water to help put up the fire. But to do so, they had to put up their hands in front of them, and the water spirit modeled this behavior. But this was really hard for a lot of participants to understand. So I would have needed to put like invisible hands in there or something to guide the participant inside the VR experience. I would definitely do that next time. I thought it was obvious as the water spirits were doing it, but it would have taken more prompting. So even if you think you're intuitive and clear, be clearer. Be inclusive. So we all know that VR is not an inclusive medium, so it's costly equipment, and a lot of people don't even have the internet access that would be necessary to be inside VR. But we can make an effort to make it as inclusive as possible. So for example, for people with varying cognitive or physical abilities, so what we thought about was how do people interact that has limited arm or no arm movement, maybe missing a hand, and then we ensure that we had interaction for the head as well. Ensure that people can stay seated if they are in a wheelchair or have balance problems, because some people have really trouble being in virtual reality because of their balance. high contrast graphics, for example, ensuring that the VR experience can be maybe guided without hearing. So maybe it should be both visual and auditory guidance. So think about how you can make it so more people can enjoy your fantastic experience. And be consistent. So there are thousands and thousands of ways to make an impactful design. But being consistent makes it easier for the participant to follow. And so we, for example, and consistency is in different ways. So if you have a fantasy world, then it's quite okay to have a person with 3 arms. But if you have a doctor's office and somebody walks in an animation, like that will probably break the presence unless it's a very goofy experience where you would expect that. So being consistent meaning do what the participant is expecting you to do, more or less, in terms of design elements. So we had a very realistic graphical design, which meant that we ensured there were only native plants in the Amazon rainforest. We ensured that the water spirits, even if they were not natural beings, well, you can argue that, but that they had a realistic design as well. And we kept the locomotion and interacting consistent throughout the experience. So this is maybe one of the more important parts of the usability as well, to keeping it consistent. I'm almost done. Only 4 more points to go. So technology, and this is not necessary, but if you can, and I know not all of you are designing in 6 degrees of freedom. So 3 degrees of freedom, as you know, means that the participant can look around up and down, but cannot move, whereas 6 degrees of freedom allows free exploration of the virtual environment. So this is one of like, this really leverages in a good way what VR is about. But it's also super important that tracking is accurate in this if you use it, because it's one of the most important aspects of immersion. So if tracking isn't accurate, like if you move your hand and the virtual hand isn't moving with your hand, it breaks presence and immersion. So we used 6 degrees of freedom because we needed that for you to be able to virtually embody Earth, and also to be able to interact with the story and create this positive outcome, the hero story that we wanted to show. Prioritize a smooth experience. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but find a balance between frame rate, detail, and resolution, and prioritize frame rates, because it's not like remove details and even resolution, but don't let it lag. That is one of the most common complaints on VR experiences, and also not good for the purpose. Engage more senses. So if you have the ability, this is virtual reality is really cool with it. You can, of course, have full body tracking and use haptic feedback, but you can now, with new devices, use touch and feel in virtual reality, like with ultrasound powered devices. You can smell and taste. This was not used in VR number 13, and I don't think a lot of you will be using it. I'm just saying it's a big potential, but right now these external devices are really limiting the amount of people that will ever be able to try your experience, because they are not available everywhere. So, but in some years, I think like engaging more senses will be really huge, and we can take this one step further when we're looking to creating impactful VR experiences. Finally, balancing deep and wide effects. So I talked about the Earth and how we use this to really go deeply into the effect, but this, using, for example, hand tracking with an external device, limited the reach. So for anyone to try it, they need to have the correct set of equipment. It's hard to take it anywhere. It's hard to just distribute it online. So having a less immersive experience, 360 video, for example, has the potential to reach a lot wider. So you need to think about what your purpose is, and if it's like, it is really impactful, even if you don't have this super deep effect, because even in a 360, there have been remarkable results in terms of prosocial behavior.
Let me ask you this real quick too,
yeah.
Ylva. Is there, I think especially for something that you create, in order for it to scale and for more people to interact with it, one thing that I'm kind of interested in is, could you create a VR experience that with a headset obviously is the most proper way to experience it? But even if you had to navigate it from your desktop because you didn't have a VR headset, could there still be more interaction, especially if there's other people in the environment with you? So now it's a social interaction. You're experiencing something with others, which typically on a website you're not doing. But can you actually have a desktop experience that was created in VR, that if you don't have the tools or the headset to actually get into VR, it still becomes a superior experience for you than your other options, to watch a video or to just browse a website to learn about it,
I haven't dived super deep into this, but I've seen VR experiences experienced in 2D screens that have shown the Proteus effect. So this effect, even navigating your avatar in like with a PC on a 2D screen, can actually have the same effect where you start associating yourself with the characteristics of your avatar. So yes, it is powerful even in like in that kind of settings, even
because
if you don't then have the immersion and like the full embodied cognition and
because the reality is it might be another 5 or 6, 7 years before people have some type of virtual reality headset, even if it's eyeglasses, that makes it very conducive and easy. So everyone's carrying that around like an iPhone. I mean, one inflection point might be the long rumored Apple glasses that eventually come out, but there needs to be some big inflection point like that before it becomes mass adoption. And so the question is, and I actually talked to some of my corporate clients about this, which is, you can build a great experience that if people have headsets, great, they're going to get in and experience something incredible. But even if they're just navigating it on a desktop, it still is superior than a website, because it has elements that websites don't have. You can't, on a website, you navigate it by going to clicks and links and hyperlinks. In a virtual reality experience on a desktop, you're actually moving your app through it. You're viewing it and you have full control of where you go and how you view it. And it's also usually more social, right? You have other people that might be in that environment with you, even if it's on a desktop. Because if we don't figure out ways to do that, it'll limit people's desire to create in these environments that they feel like, well, my only audience is people that have a headset and can afford one and put one on. Well, no, that's not true. Even on a desktop, these are some pretty incredible experiences. Definitely better than how you'd experience it with your other options, like just reading about it on a website, right?
Yeah. No, 100%. And there are a lot of the learnings here that you can actually apply as well to experiencing in a 2D environment. You can have people go to extraordinary places, even if they're there in a 2D screen. So there are a little bit like, of course, this is again balancing deep and wide effect. I would say that this would increase the width. Like you can really do it. It comes a little less deep, but it's definitely deeper than a lot of alternatives, like you say, a web page or similar. So definitely you can do that. And I've seen research with positive effects, definitely.
Because I think I predict that within 5 years, sure, everyone may not have a headset or a VR headset. And some people may just prefer never to get into a VR headset. But I do predict within 5 years that majority of websites, even corporate websites, will become a virtual immersive experience to navigate through versus your traditional, what would be considered an old school website, which is like the way the web is designed today.
Yeah, but I mean, and yeah, 100%. And I think the same things apply there. You need to know what is the purpose of this experience, regardless of how you're exploring it. How do you ensure that it's easy to walk around and not get disoriented? How do you tell your story inside of this, like, regardless of how you navigate your avatar? So if it's
everything applies the same that you're sharing. The methodology and the framework is all 100% applicable. It's like your plan B. If plan A doesn't work out, that someone has a headset, it doesn't mean that they can't enjoy your creation and have it be highly effective.
Yeah, definitely. I realized that I had one more slide. It's just, these are the results from my studies. So I used to be Earth number 13. I had people go into the VR experience. I interviewed them before and after, and 1 month after. I also had a control group who got the same information as the VR group, but in a textual format. So they had the same climate change related information. And I compared these two groups, and the VR group had significantly higher motivation to change directly after the intervention and after 1 month. They had a higher perceived impact. They increased their pro-social behavior, both in comparison to themselves before the VR intervention, but also in terms versus the control group who had the same kind of behavior before the intervention. And this is a easy statistic. So I also allowed the participants in both conditions to access some materials I had on climate change. And 62% of the VR learners went in to find more information about how to reduce their climate footprint and learn more on actions and causes of climate change, versus 28% of the non-VR participants.
So that's an interesting statistic there. So if you had a cohort that went through the VR experience versus a cohort that, now, did they do a different experience? They just didn't do it in VR?
They received in the same climate change information, which is a bit emotionally engaging still, but I wanted to provide the same information that was provided in the VR experience, but in a textual format. They read the text.
I love this. This is consistent. Is this the last slide?
Yes, it is. And the final bullet point there is just the sense of comfort. So I was comfortable. I didn't get nauseous. The sense of flow. I was in a state of concentration, and this had high impact, especially emotional impact, were the factors that had a highest correlation to a prosocial change. That was my final.
And the only reason I asked of the final slide, because I want to actually, if you show that statistic again, because this is, I love seeing data. I love when scientists like you produce efficacy data like this, because I'm very much an empirical data person. Like, I really interested. I'm intellectually curious about, like, when you take a group of learners that are not in VR and take one that is in VR, give them the same content, but in these two medium, what is the effect? Like, that's really when the rubber meets the road on how effective VR can be. And this statistic interests me, because you're basically saying, and this is related to your climate action, SDGs. Okay, so so when you took them through your virtual experience around climate action, the one that you shared with us previously, you took one group of learners through that, or one audience through that.
Yeah.
Another audience you took through just text version of that same content. So they all got the same information. They just ingested it in two completely different ways. And you're saying that when you did that, there was the ones that went through virtual reality were 62% more likely to engage after the fact into learning more about what they can do and how do they activate themselves?
62% of them, of everyone, like 62% of everyone who went through VR wanted to learn more, but only 28% of those who didn't. The same, like, size of the group, and the groups were I controlled that they were equal before, so I had a pre-test and post-test, and they like, this is statistically proven data.
So if you had So statistically, if you had 100 people, 62 of them will decide to go and learn more about the subject, because VR motivated them that way, it changed their behavior, versus those that just did this less immersive ingestion of the information, like reading it as text. Only 28 out of 100 of them decided to move forward and do something. That's super interesting. It reminds me of, I'll show this one. I mean, this is a study that we've shared a lot and we reference it a lot. It's kind of the one that motivated us to launch the nonprofit we have, because we saw the study, and that's when we just said, wonder if we can get these statistics in a public school in a low-income community, because these statistics that PwC came up with it's years old now. So these statistics could be so much higher, I imagine, if you did this study again, because 2019 is when they actually did this study. They published it in 2020. I imagine that, the tech has evolved so much since then, but the virtual reality learners were 4 times faster to train than a traditional classroom setting. 275% improved confidence to act on issues. Now, remember, this was kind of a corporate training type thing. Wasn't really your field of study of social impact related things. It was just training in general. But I like this. I like seeing this type of efficacy data surfacing, the work that you're doing, this particular study, because it's just, the numbers are pretty extraordinary. I mean, you talk to a school teacher in a public school, if they got 10% improvement on engagement from students, it's a win. And so to get 275%, to get this exponential lift instead of an incremental lift or a linear lift is pretty significant. And that's, I think, the power of like why I think we're all excited about VR. And it becomes obvious when you put on a VR headset and do these things, you understand those statistics, right? Like most people don't. I mean, because you built that Earth SDG climate action experience, because you created it and you've been in it, it's almost intuitive to you as a person that if I experience it this way, I know it's going to be highly more effective than any other way I can experience. It's just intuitive because it's like I experienced it. And when you experience something, your behavior changes a lot more than if you just passively read about it. And that's the whole field that I think is going to be really interesting in the next several years, is how this gets, how the cross-pollination with the work that you're doing gets into fields like anthropology, sociology, psychology. I'm curious, do you ever have I'm wondering when a psychologist will call you up. And if I was in the field of psychology in the traditional sense, and I heard you speak or what you're doing, I would be adamant to be like finding your number to call you up and be like, I'm a psychologist. I teach, I'm trying to help people with depression or with dealing with like post-traumatic stress or what have you. I would totally want to like pick your brain about how do I use these frameworks to reinvent my field.
Yeah, there are a lot of studies ongoing within psychology using VR. So it is, for psychology, it is a really, really strong tool. And another thing, I agree with I read a lot on virtual reality and learning as well. I didn't incorporate it in my thesis, but there are significantly like really, really powerful effects of virtual reality and learning. But there haven't been too many studies performed in a scientific way with students yet. There are some, and the results are really, really promising.
Well, maybe, I mean, with the work that Exponential Destiny that we do with public schools, we've done, west side of Chicago, South Central Los Angeles, Florida. The next project we do, I'd love to have you come on and actually maybe help us do some professional efficacy data research into it.
Yeah.
That before and after, because especially in a public school, because they need that so bad, especially in underserved communities, it's kind of a, it's a really tough job to be a teacher in those environments. And this is a tool that lets them get excited about teaching again. That's kind of what we hear from teachers from these inner city schools is like, my gosh, this is like technology that I, as a teacher, even non-technical teacher, feel like I could use with my students. The cost has come down a lot and I'm excited about teaching again. That's like the most endearing thing to hear from a teacher who chose that as a profession, who's kind of at their wit's end with limited resources and not a lot of creativity they can unleash in these environments, but this lets them do that.
Yeah.
Listen, first of all, that's phenomenal. I really respect the work you're doing. I think that's.
May I just a little send a little note to everyone in the competition,
please,
before we end this. So I know that you're already come a long way, and I know that not everything I said was relevant to you, but I think that maybe you can find parts of it to look, because every point is built on science and what works, but also you can use it in, for example, the video that you have to like, or when you sell your experience to someone else, you can use some of these points to tell why you did some of the decisions you made. So for example, we did this to ensure that they were transported to see something they didn't know before, because increased familiarity actually is linked to prosocial behavior. Or like you can take parts that maybe strengthen what you already did, and parts, maybe small pieces here and there, to maybe take some things off your existing experience.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I would hope it was helpful.
Yeah, no, I think, as a matter of fact, I think what I would suggest our community to do is when they create their videos, remember the teams are going to create a video submission because we have 256 teams. So we're going to filter it down to the final group that we actually really get into headsets and evaluate. But I think when all of you in the community submit your videos to us, where you describe your experience and what you did, and ask that we get into a headset to really experience it and see if you make that filtering cut, to that next phase of the judging. I think it'd be great if you, very similar to what you're suggesting, Ylva, is reference strategically, talk about what you did with your experience, and reference, we're hitting Ylva's list of things that she's suggesting, even if you didn't hit them all because you didn't have this insight before you built your experience. But it's good to say, we feel like what we've done is highly effective because we saw the data that Ylva shared with us on how to do this effectively. We hit 6 or 7 of these these criteria about how to do a good environment. I think it's a good way to share back with us the sophistication in your work that you've done, as those in the community that are putting together these experiences. And then for those of you in the community, we've already asked Ylva if she would help us with some of the final judging. So I think when we get to making some of the final decisions about the allocation of the prize money, we've shared with all of you that we had the Virtual World Society, individuals from the UN agencies, but then also professionals like Caitlin Krause and Ylva. We're going to recruit them into the final decision-making process to help us really separate good from great in terms of those experiences. And I think what you just heard was a lesson on how to create great, a framework for designing great. And so we really appreciate it. Now, Ylva, is there any, for those people that watch this and they really want to, first, when is your book coming out? It'd be great to see a book about all this. Or do you have any other points of reference, like videos where you go into more detail, or even the experience around the action plan, SDG, climate action plan, where they can actually view that online? Is there any resources like that? We'll post, Sam, you can send some of the links to us afterwards. We can post it with the video, but is there any at a high level you can reference right now?
No, I mean, the easiest way is to just give to my not-for-profit organization, so xrimpact.com. And there is a way to contact me through there as well. But I have some of the information there, and I'm waiting to. I just completed my dissertation, so I will write something, but I'm not there yet, so I don't have anything else to give you right now.
All right. Well, great. Well, we're excited for when that comes out. So that's excellent. All right. Well, we appreciate Ylva, you taking the time to share with the community, and I think this will be a real asset out of all the tutorials or information sessions that we've done. I think yours is a real highlight to that portfolio of what we put onto our YouTube channel. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and good luck to everyone. Like, what you're doing is amazing and it's really needed, and I'm so excited to see it.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Thank you.